Okay, so picture this, guys. 1 minute, I'm trying to discreetly wipe a smear of caviar off a borrowed designer dress. Yes, caviar, because apparently that's what rich people eat for fun. And the next, my ex-husband Mark is storming across the marble floor of this ridiculously fancy charity gala, yelling something about parental alienation while flashing a printout of a tabloid article with my face plastered all over it. All this while my billionaire boyfriend, Alex, is trying to calm down a very flustered duchess who just spilt her champagne because of the commotion. Yeah, that was my Tuesday. Welcome to my life. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sarah, how in the world did you, a woman who once considered a 2-for-1 deal on instant noodles a gourmet meal, end up in a situation like that? And honestly, that's a very fair question. Because if you had told me even a year ago that I'd be dating a literal billionaire, navigating red carpets, and having my name splashed across gossip magazines, I would have laughed so hard I probably would have snorted coffee out of my nose. My life was, let's just say, a little less glamorous back then. A lot less glamorous, actually. It was more like, will I have enough money for Lily's school trip and groceries this week kind of glamorous. So how did I get from coupon clipping and single momming it up in a tiny apartment to dodging paparazzi and dealing with caviar-related wardrobe malfunctions? Well, it all started, as most of my life's biggest disasters and triumphs do, with a nap. A very, very ill-timed nap. I was flying back home after visiting my sister, who lives a few states away. It wasn't a vacation, not really, more like a desperate plea for free childcare while I worked a double shift at the diner. You know, the kind of trip where you pack an entire week's worth of clothes into a single, slightly ripped carry-on bag, because checking a bag costs extra, and extra money was a luxury I simply did not have. I was tired, guys, bone-weary tired. The kind of tired where your eyelids feel like they're made of lead and your brain feels like a deflated balloon. My daughter Lily, who was 6 at the time, was back with a friend, and I missed her like crazy, but I needed to make that money. Every single penny counted. The flight was long. It was one of those budget flights where the seats are so close together you can practically smell what the person in front of you had for breakfast. I had the window seat, which usually I love, but that day all I wanted was to disappear. I had a cheap neck pillow that offered zero support, and my headphones were tangled beyond repair. I tried to read a book, but the words just swam on the page. I tried to listen to music, but my phone battery was almost dead. So I did what any self-respecting, exhausted single mom would do. I tried to sleep. I leaned against the window, but it was cold and uncomfortable. I shifted in my seat, trying to find a comfortable position, but it felt like I was trying to sleep on a pile of rocks. The person next to me was quiet, thankfully. No loud chewing, no incessant talking on the phone, just a quiet presence. I remember thinking, thank goodness for small mercies. And then the sleep started to creep in. It wasn't a gentle drift, more like a sudden, overwhelming wave that just crashed over me. 1 minute I was awake, the next I was gone. Now, here's where things get a little fuzzy. And by fuzzy, I mean utterly mortifying. When you're that tired, your body just takes over. Your head lolls, your muscles relax, and you just seek comfort. And apparently, in my sleep-deprived state, the most comfortable thing available was the shoulder of the complete stranger sitting next to me. I woke up with a jolt, not because of turbulence or an announcement, but because my neck had suddenly cramped in a very awkward position. I blinked, disoriented, and then slowly, horrifyingly, realized my head was resting firmly on someone's shoulder. And it wasn't my sister, or my mom, or anyone I knew. It was a man. A very well-dressed, very handsome man, whose expensive suit jacket was now probably covered in a combination of my drool and whatever crumbs had been clinging to my hair. My heart immediately started pounding like a drum solo. My face felt like it was on fire. I quickly, awkwardly lifted my head, mumbling something that sounded vaguely like, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry." I probably looked like a startled squirrel who had just realized it was in a lion's den. I glanced at him, expecting a glare, a sigh, maybe even an annoyed huff. But he wasn't glaring. He was smiling. A small, polite, almost amused smile. "It's quite all right," he said, and his voice was deep, calm, and surprisingly kind. "You seemed very comfortable." Comfortable? Oh, I bet I did. I probably looked like a sleeping baby koala glued to his shoulder. The shame was immediate and overwhelming. I wanted the airplane floor to open up and swallow me whole. I wanted to rewind time and glue my head to the window. I wanted to just disappear. No, really, I am so sorry," I insisted, my voice a mortified whisper. "I must have been more tired than I thought. I didn't mean to," I trailed off, not knowing how to finish that sentence. "Use your shoulder as a pillow for an indeterminate amount of time? Dribble on your expensive clothing?" The options were endless, and all of them equally embarrassing. He chuckled softly. "No harm done, I assure you. Happens to the best of us on long flights." He said it so casually, so smoothly, as if people falling asleep on his shoulder was a regular Tuesday for him, which, knowing what I know now, it probably wasn't. I finally managed to get a good look at him. He had dark, neatly styled hair, piercing blue eyes, and a jawline that looked like it was carved by a very talented sculptor. His suit was definitely designer, the kind that probably cost more than my car, or my apartment even. He had an expensive watch peeking out from under his cuff. He looked like he belonged on the cover of a business magazine, not squished into a budget airline seat next to a woman who had just used him as a human pillow. "I'm Sarah, by the way," I managed to stammer, extending a slightly shaky hand. He took it, and his grip was firm but gentle. "Alex, nice to meet you, Sarah, even under these unusual circumstances." He still had that amused glint in his eyes. We spent the rest of the flight in a strange, awkward, yet strangely comfortable silence. I was too embarrassed to initiate much conversation, and he seemed content to read a book on his tablet. But every now and then, I'd catch him glancing at me, and that small, kind smile would be there. It wasn't a creepy stare, just an interested one, which, for a woman who mostly felt invisible, was a little unsettling. And also, if I'm being honest, a little thrilling. When the plane landed, I practically bolted out of my seat, eager to escape the lingering awkwardness. "Well, it was nice to meet you, Alex," I said, probably too quickly, already halfway down the aisle. He stood up, looking impossibly tall and elegant, even in the cramped space. "You too, Sarah. Perhaps our paths will cross again." I just gave a weak smile, thinking, yeah, right, like I'm ever going to run into a guy like him again. My life was about struggling to pay bills, not bumping into billionaires. I figured that was the end of it. A funny, embarrassing story I'd tell my sister, maybe, about the time I drooled on a handsome stranger. Boy, was I wrong. As I was waiting for my luggage, which, of course, was one of the last bags to come out, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, and there he was, Alex. My heart did that little fluttery thing again. "Hey," he said, a little out of breath, like he'd been looking for me. "I was hoping to catch you. I know this is a bit forward, but I was wondering if I could get your number." My jaw probably dropped. Seriously? A guy like him wanted my number? Me, Sarah, the queen of budget airlines and instant noodles? I was wearing sweatpants, for crying out loud, and my hair was probably a disaster. "My number?" I repeated, sounding like a parrot. He chuckled. "Yes, your number. I enjoyed our conversation, and I'd like to take you out for coffee sometime, or dinner, if you'd prefer." I just stared at him for a moment, my brain trying to process this information. My internal monologue was basically a siren going off, screaming, "Code red, handsome, rich man is asking you out. Do not screw this up." "Oh, sure," I finally managed, fumbling for my phone. My hands were actually shaking a little. I punched in my number, double-checked it, and handed it to him. "Great," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "I'll call you." And with a nod, he was gone, disappearing into the crowd of people. I stood there for a good minute, just staring at the spot where he had been. Did that just happen? Had I just given my number to a guy who probably owned half of the city? I felt a mix of exhilaration and complete disbelief. This was either the beginning of a really bad rom-com or the universe playing a very elaborate prank on me. True to his word, Alex called me the next day. I almost dropped my phone when I saw his name pop up. We talked for a while, just light conversation, about our jobs, our lives. I kept it pretty vague about my financial situation, mostly out of embarrassment. He, on the other hand, was surprisingly open about his work, though he didn't brag. He just talked about projects and investments in a way that made it clear he was a very successful businessman. He asked me out for dinner that weekend. Now, dinner with a billionaire. What does one wear to dinner with a billionaire when your entire wardrobe consists of practical, durable, and mostly
stain-resistant clothes? I had one dress, a little black dress I'd bought for a friend's wedding years ago. It was simple, elegant, and crucially, it still fit. I spent an hour trying to make my hair look presentable and another half hour trying to decide if I should wear my only pair of slightly too tight heels or just stick with my comfortable flats. I went with the heels because, first impressions. He picked me up in a car that I'm pretty sure cost more than my entire family's net worth. It was sleek, black, and probably had more horsepower than a small village. I felt ridiculously out of place stepping into it. He was wearing a suit again, of course, looking effortlessly sophisticated. I, on the other hand, felt like Cinderella who had accidentally stumbled into the wrong ball. The restaurant was fancy. And by fancy, I mean the kind of place where the menu doesn't have prices and the waiters look like they judge your life choices based on how you hold your fort. I immediately felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. I tried to act casual, but inside I was panicking. What if I ordered the wrong thing? What if I spilled something? What if I accidentally used the wrong fork? Alex, sensing my unease, immediately put me at ease. He talked about funny stories from his own life, asked me genuine questions about mine, and made me feel like I wasn't just some charity case he was entertaining. He listened intently when I talked about Lily, about my hopes and dreams for her, and about the struggles of being a single mom. He didn't pity me, he just understood. Or at least he tried to. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. I found myself laughing, genuinely laughing, for the first time in a long time. He was smart, witty, and surprisingly down to earth, despite his obvious wealth. He told me about his passion projects, about wanting to make a difference in the world, not just accumulate more money. And I found myself completely captivated. After that first date, there were more, a lot more. He took me to places I'd only ever seen in movies, art galleries, private concerts, even a weekend trip to a secluded beach house that looked like it belonged on a postcard. Each time, I felt a mix of awe and complete absurdity. Me, Sarah, in these places? It felt surreal. But amidst all the glamour, what really drew me to Alex was his kindness. He never made me feel small or inadequate because of my background. He was always patient, always understanding, and always respectful. He genuinely seemed interested in me, not just the novelty of my situation. He was just Alex, the man who made me laugh and whose shoulder I had once drooled on. Of course, there was the inevitable moment when I had to introduce him to Lily. I was so nervous. Lily was my whole world, and her opinion mattered more than anything. I wanted her to like Alex, but I also didn't want her to get too attached too quickly. I explained to Alex that Lily was my priority, and he completely understood. He even brought her a small, thoughtful gift, a book about space, because I'd mentioned she loved stars. The day they met was surprisingly sweet. Alex was great with kids. He didn't talk down to her, he engaged her in conversation, and he even got down on the floor to build a tower with her blocks. Lily, usually a bit shy around new people, warmed up to him almost immediately. She even called him Mr. Alex for a while, which I thought was adorable. Seeing them together, seeing Alex make Lily laugh, melted my heart in a way I hadn't expected. It was then that I realized this wasn't just a fun, temporary fling. This was something real. As my relationship with Alex grew, so did the changes in my life. I was able to quit my diner job, something I never thought would happen. Alex insisted on helping me out, not just with money, but with practical things. He helped me find a better school for Lily, one with smaller class sizes and more resources. He encouraged me to pursue my own passions, something I hadn't even thought about in years. He opened up a world of possibilities for me and Lily that I never knew existed. But with all the good came the inevitable complications. And the first, biggest complication was my ex-husband, Mark. Mark and I had a messy divorce. He was never really present in Lily's life, always finding excuses not to see her, always late with child support, when he paid it at all. He was, to put it mildly, a bit of a deadbeat. But he was also incredibly possessive and prone to fits of jealousy, especially when it came to me moving on. He first found out about Alex when I accidentally mentioned him during a phone call about Lily's visitation schedule. It was a casual comment, something like, "Oh, Alex and I are taking Lily to the park this weekend." The line went silent. I immediately regretted it. "Alex?" Mark's voice was cold, laced with suspicion. "Who's Alex?" I tried to play it down. "Just a
Friend, Mark. Someone I'm seeing." "A friend? You're seeing someone? Who is he? What does he do?" The questions came fast and furious, each one dripping with a hostile curiosity. I tried to keep my voice calm. "It's none of your business, Mark. It's my life." "It is my business if he's around my daughter," he retorted, his voice rising. "I have a right to know who you're letting around Lily." And that's when the threat started, subtle at first. "I hope this Alex character is a good influence, Sarah, because if he's not, I'll make sure you regret it." Or, I've been thinking, maybe Lily should spend more time with her real father." He started demanding more visitation, suddenly acting like the most involved parent in the world. It was transparent, and it was infuriating. He wasn't interested in Lily, he was interested in controlling me, in making my life difficult. I tried to ignore him, to focus on my happiness with Alex and Lily. But Mark was persistent. He started showing up unannounced at my old apartment, even though I had moved into a nicer, safer place that Alex had helped me find. He would call relentlessly, sometimes leaving angry voicemails, sometimes just hanging up. It was harassment, pure and simple. Alex, bless his heart, tried to be supportive. He told me not to worry, that he would handle Mark if it came to that. But I knew how Mark was. He was a master manipulator, and he knew how to push my buttons. And the biggest button was always Lily. Then came the media. Oh, the media. I had honestly completely underestimated this part of dating a billionaire. I thought it would just be private jets and fancy dinners. I did not anticipate becoming tabloid fodder. It started with a few blurry photos. Alex and I leaving a restaurant. Alex and I at a charity event. Alex and I walking in a park with Lily. The headlines were sensational. Billionaire Alex Thorne snags mystery woman. Who is Sarah Miller, the new woman in Thorne's life? From rags to riches, Thorne's new girlfriend a single mom. My name, my face, suddenly everywhere. It was terrifying. I was used to being anonymous, to blending into the background. Now, every time I left the house, I felt like I was being watched. Paparazzi seemed to materialize out of thin air. They would shout questions at me, try to get a reaction, shove cameras in my face. It was overwhelming. The stories were even worse. They dug up everything they could find about my past. My old apartment, my diner job, my divorce from Mark. They painted me as a gold digger, a woman who had strategically snagged a rich man to escape her humble life. They twisted every detail, exaggerated every struggle. They even started speculating about Lily, implying that she was just a prop in my new lavish lifestyle. That hurt the most. Alex, again, tried to shield me from it all. He hired security, he issued statements, he tried to control the narrative. But once the media hounds are unleashed, it's hard to put them back in their cage. He was used to it, of course. He'd been in the public eye his whole life. But I wasn't. I was just Sarah. The rumors and the paparazzi started to affect Lily. She was seeing my face on magazines at the grocery store checkout. Kids at school started asking her questions. She was confused, a little scared. I tried to explain it to her in a way she could understand, that some people were just curious about Alex and me. But it was hard. I hated that my relationship was causing her stress. And then Mark saw his opportunity. He loved the attention, even if it was negative. He started giving interviews to the tabloids, painting himself as the wronged father, the concerned ex-husband. He claimed I was neglecting Lily, that I was too busy chasing fame and fortune to be a good mother. He even went as far as to suggest that Alex was an unfit influence, a playboy who would abandon us as soon as the novelty wore off. It was a vicious, calculated attack. He filed for full custody of Lily. That was the turning point. Before, it was just annoying, embarrassing. Now it was a direct threat to my child, to my life, to everything I held dear. Mark, who barely showed up for Lily's birthdays, was suddenly claiming he was a better parent. It was absurd. But in a courtroom with the media swirling, anything could happen. I was terrified. I spent days crying, panicking. Alex was amazing through it all. He hired the best lawyers, he reassured me constantly, he held my hand through every tearful phone call. He told me we would fight this, and we would win. He told me he loved me, that he loved Lily, and that we were a family. His unwavering support was the only thing that kept me sane. The legal battle was grueling. Mark's lawyers dug up every single detail of my past, twisting it into something ugly. They brought up my financial struggles, my old job, implying I was unstable and irresponsible. They used the tabloid articles as evidence, claiming I was obsessed with fame and money. It was a character assassination, pure and simple. I had to stand there in court and listen to them dissect my life, picking apart every vulnerable moment, every mistake I had ever made. It was humiliating. I felt exposed, raw. But every time I looked at Alex, sitting there, quiet but steadfast, or thought of Lily, I found a new surge of strength. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for our future. The day of the gala, the one I mentioned at the beginning, was supposed to be a distraction. Alex had insisted I come. It was a major charity event, one he co-hosted every year. He wanted me by his side to show the world that we were strong, that we were together, and that we weren't going to let Mark or the media break us. I had spent hours getting ready. Alex's personal stylist, a very sweet woman named Chloe, had helped me pick out a dress. It was a stunning emerald green gown made of silk that shimmered when I moved. It was probably the most expensive piece of clothing I had ever worn, and I felt like a movie star, a very nervous movie star, but a movie star nonetheless. Chloe had done my hair and makeup, and for the first time in a long time, I actually felt beautiful. Not just pretty, but truly beautiful. As we walked into the ballroom, flashbulbs immediately started going off. The roar of the crowd, the whispers, the cameras, it was all overwhelming. Alex squeezed my hand, a silent reassurance. He looked incredibly handsome in his tuxedo, a picture of calm confidence. I tried to channel his energy, to stand tall, to smile. We mingled, we chatted, we even managed to avoid most of the pointed questions from reporters. I was starting to relax, to actually enjoy myself. The food was exquisite, tiny little bites of things I couldn't even identify, but they tasted amazing. And yes, there was caviar, lots of it. I tried to eat it elegantly, but I'm a diner girl at heart, so a tiny bit ended up on my dress. That's when I was trying to wipe it off, discreetly, hoping no one noticed. And then, like a villain in a bad movie, Mark appeared. He wasn't invited, of course. He must have snuck in, or perhaps talked his way in with some elaborate lie. He looked disheveled, angry, and completely out of place in his ill-fitting suit. He had a stack of papers in his hand, and his eyes were darting around the room, looking for me. My stomach dropped. I immediately grabbed Alex's arm. "Alex," I whispered, my voice tight with panic. "It's Mark. He's here." Alex followed my gaze, and his jaw tightened. His calm demeanor instantly changed, replaced by a steely resolve. "Stay calm, Sarah," he murmured. "I'll handle this." But before he could even take a step, Mark spotted me. His eyes narrowed, and a sneer spread across his face. He started to walk, then stride, then practically run across the polished marble floor, heading straight for us. "Sarah, you gold-digging witch!" he yelled, his voice echoing through the opulent ballroom. Heads turned, conversation stopped. All eyes were suddenly on us. My face went hot with embarrassment and fear. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But I just stood there, frozen, gripping Alex's arms so tightly my knuckles were white. "How dare you bring my daughter into this circus?" Mark continued, waving the tabloid article in his hand. "You think you can just abandon your responsibilities for a rich man? Parental alienation, that's what this is." The Duchess, who Alex had been politely chatting with just moments before, gasped, spilling her champagne down her own expensive gown. Alex, ever the gentleman, quickly grabbed a napkin to help her, but his eyes were still on Mark. "Mark, that's enough," Alex said, his voice low and firm, cutting through the sudden silence in the room. "You are not welcome here. Leave immediately." But Mark was beyond reason. He was fueled by anger and a desperate need for attention. He pushed past a security guard who was trying to intercept him and lunged towards me, waving the article like a weapon. "You're a disgrace, Sarah, a total disgrace, and you're not going to take Lily away from me." I flinched, instinctively stepping back behind Alex. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. This was it, the public meltdown, the ultimate humiliation. Alex stepped forward, putting himself squarely between me and Mark. His posture was commanding, his eyes narrowed into slits of cold fury. "You will not speak to her like that, you will not threaten her, and you will not cause a scene here." Mark laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Oh, the big-shot billionaire is going to protect his little charity case? Don't make me laugh. Everyone here knows what she is, a desperate single mom who latched on to the first rich guy who looked her way." He then turned his attention to the cameras that had suddenly appeared, drawn by the commotion. "This woman is unfit to be a mother. She's using her daughter as leverage. She's a fraud." The flashbulbs were blinding. The whispers were growing louder. I could feel tears stinging my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not now. Alex, with a surprising swiftness, grabbed Mark by the arm. Not violently, but firmly, with an undeniable authority. "You are making a very big mistake, Mark. I suggest you reconsider your actions right now." Mark tried to pull away, but Alex's grip was like iron. "Let go of me, you rich bastard. I have rights. I'm Lily's father." "Your rights ended the moment you started using your daughter as a pawn in your pathetic attempts to control Sarah," Alex said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And as for causing a scene, you've done a remarkable job of it. Now you will leave, or I will have you escorted out in a way you will not enjoy." Just then, two very large, very serious-looking security guards appeared, flanking Mark. They were not subtle. Mark finally seemed to realize he was outmatched. His bluster deflated slightly, though the anger still simmered in his eyes. He glared at me one last time, a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over, Sarah. You haven't heard the last of me." And then, with a final desperate shove, he broke free of Alex's grip and was quickly and unceremoniously escorted out of the ballroom by the security guards. The entire incident, from Mark's entrance to his exit, probably lasted less than 5 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone was staring. The Duchess was still dabbing her dress. I felt a profound sense of mortification, but also, surprisingly, a strange sense of relief. It was out there. The ugly truth, the messy reality of my life had been laid bare in front of everyone, and I was still standing. Alex immediately turned to me, his expression softening with concern. "Are you all right, Sarah?" he asked, gently touching my arm. I nodded, though my legs felt like jelly. "Yeah," I whispered. "Yeah, I think so." He looked around the room, meeting the curious gazes of the guests with a calm, almost defiant expression. Then he did something that completely surprised me. He took my hand, lifted it, and kissed it gently. Then he smiled at me, a warm, reassuring smile that reached his eyes. "He won't bother you again," Alex said, his voice loud enough for many of the nearby guests to hear. "Not here, not anywhere." And in that moment, standing there in the aftermath of the chaos, with cameras still flashing and whispers still circulating, I felt an overwhelming surge of love and gratitude for Alex. He wasn't just a rich man. He was my rock, my protector, my partner. He saw me, truly saw me, with all my baggage and all my flaws, and he still chose to stand by me. The rest of the gala was a blur. Alex made sure I was comfortable, he kept reassuring me, and he even managed to make a few jokes to lighten the mood. The Duchess, bless her heart, even came over to apologize for her spilled champagne, which was just wonderfully British of her. Slowly, the buzz in the room shifted, from shock to curiosity to a kind of quiet respect. Many people came up to us offering their support, expressing their admiration for how we handled the situation. It was unexpected, and it was comforting. The next few weeks were still a roller coaster, but the tide had turned. Mark's public outburst at the gala, combined with Alex's legal team's relentless work, sealed his fate in court. The judge saw through his manipulative tactics, especially after hearing about his history of inconsistent parenting and his recent attempts to leverage Lily for his own agenda. It was a long, emotionally draining battle, but we won. I retained full custody of Lily, and Mark's visitation rights were severely restricted, supervised, and contingent on him attending anger management and parenting classes. It was a huge relief, like a giant weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The media storm also began to die down. Alex's public relations team worked tirelessly, issuing statements that clarified the situation, highlighted our commitment to Lily, and subtly exposed Mark's true colors. The narrative shifted from gold digger to resilient single mom fighting for her child. It wasn't perfect, and the paparazzi still occasionally lurked, but it was manageable. I learned to ignore them, to focus on what truly mattered, my family. Life with Alex settled into a new, comfortable rhythm. It wasn't always easy, of course. There were still moments of awkwardness, like when I accidentally used the wrong fork at a fancy dinner, or when I had to remind myself not to flinch every time a camera flashed. But we navigated it together, with humor and patience. I learned to appreciate the luxury, but I never forgot where I came from. I still loved a good bargain, and I still cherished the simple moments with Lily. Alex, for his part, continued to be incredible. He didn't try to change me. He just loved me for who I was. He loved my messy hair, my sometimes too loud laugh, and my absolute devotion to Lily. He became a wonderful stepfather figure to Lily, always there for her, always supportive, always kind. He taught her how to ride a bike, he helped her with her homework, and he cheered her on at her school plays. Seeing them together, seeing the genuine love and bond they shared, was the greatest joy of my life.
One evening, a few months after the gala incident, Alex and I were sitting on the terrace of his penthouse, overlooking the glittering city skyline. Lily was asleep in her room, and the city lights twinkled below us like a million tiny diamonds. It was a beautiful, peaceful moment. "You know," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder, just like I had on that airplane, but this time it was intentional, loving, and completely unembarrassing. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life, that I'm here with you, with Lily, in this incredible place." He chuckled, wrapping his arm around me. "Believe it, Sarah. It's real, and it's exactly where you're supposed to be." I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "I guess I owe that airplane nap a lot, huh?" He kissed the top of my head. "I think I do too. Best nap you ever took, wouldn't you say?" I laughed, definitely, though I still apologize for the drool. He just squeezed me tighter. Wouldn't have traded it for anything. And that, my friends, is how I, Sarah Miller, the woman who once worried about instant noodle deals, ended up living a life I never dreamed possible. It wasn't easy, it was messy, it was stressful, and it was often incredibly awkward and funny. But it was also filled with love, laughter, and a surprising amount of caviar. I learned that true love isn't about status or money. It's about finding someone who sees you, supports you, and stands by you, no matter how chaotic your ex-husband or the media might make things. It's about building a future, one awkward, hilarious, and utterly unforgettable moment at a time. It's about finding your happily ever after, even if it starts with a very public, very embarrassing nap on a stranger's shoulder.